One thing to be aware of, within an organic system, you have to first always look to use certified organic seeds if they're unavailable. And by unavailable, it means in the quantity you need and the quality you need, a specific variety you need is not available, certified organic, then it is possible to use conventional products that are untreated. When it comes to seedlings, so that'd be for annual cropping, so vegetable crops, things like that. It would also include strawberry plugs for annual plasticulture production. Those have to be certified organic. The rule makes no allowance for annual seedlings to be non-organic. Perennial crops can be non-organic, non-certified, if you first demonstrate, again, the lack of availability, the lack of quality, specific varieties, etc., in a certified organic form. And then you can use conventional perennial planting stock. In the instance of asparagus crowns, that ground would be able to be certified because the asparagus crowns themselves would not be considered a prohibited substance even if you failed to do a search to demonstrate that it was unavailable. It's because you're not certified yet. So there's a little less stringent requirements during the transition period, but conceptually it's still a good idea to know what the requirements are. And definitely still no treated seed and things of that nature. Conventional seeds themselves alone would not be a prohibited product. The trouble lies in possibly were they a treated seed, or can you demonstrate to us they were a treated seed? Probably if we're talking about greens, they were not, most likely. But that's a scenario where we'd want you to have some sort of substantiation to demonstrate that, if at all possible. So seed tags, seed bags, things of that nature are ideal for that. Yeah, invoicing is good. A lot of companies do have codes on there to indicate whether things are treated or untreated. And so those sorts of materials are what's needed to be maintained during that transition period. And just always be aware that, you know, there are restrictions during the transition period. They're a little bit easier to meet because you're not yet certified, but if you do plant something that is an outright prohibited material or coated or treated with it, that's where a problem happens. Bees are not easily certified within the U.S. because they're currently certified under livestock standards. Livestock standards say that all the material eaten by an animal has to be certified organic. So, exactly. So even if you said a 1 mile flight path has to be all certified organic, you're not going to run into a scenario in Kentucky where that's possible. That may eventually change. For several years, the USDA has been looking at apiculture specific standards. Those haven't happened yet. So we'll see what they turn into when they get here. This is something that's very important, and we occasionally have experienced producers who run across this problem and make a mistake. Untreated. For most of the agriculture world, and particularly within the seed industry, when you say untreated, it means no fungicide or no insecticide on it. The problem is untreated for the organic purposes includes no seed coatings and no prohibited inoculants. So we've had instances, particularly with legumes and pastures, where someone will plant a red clover or something like that. It is untreated, quote unquote. It'll even say it on the seed tag, but it'll have a coating or it'll have an inoculant. And again, it's a language difference, and so you need to make sure you understand that untreated for organic certification purposes is not simply it's not pink seed or it's not green seed. No, the coatings they'll put on there to indicate a fungicide treatment. It actually includes things like inoculation, things like coatings to help with seed movement and stuff like that within planters. Soil fertility, I always say start with a soil test. I think it's extremely important since we are limited on applying nutrients only as needed, that you actually know where you're starting at and what you have to work with. And then from that, crop rotations. Obviously, with a perennial crop, that's limited, so we have to be very attentive to the nutritional needs. Conserving organic matter. This is one that still works within perennial crops. Whenever you're doing mulching on these plants, you know, whenever that mulch is disappearing, that's actually mulch that's going back into the organic reserves of the soil. And anytime you can add organic matter, you're one, creating a place for nutrients to be, creating a place for water to be. So it's ideal that you increase organic matter. It's of the utmost necessity. And again, you can use those restricted inputs as needed, but there does have to be a demonstrated need. This is one where, again, with a blueberry crop, we're not looking at direct application, but crop rotation is of extreme importance within organic as a whole because it helps with things such as nutrient management, pest management, and so it is something that's heavily involved with organic certification. So if you're going to be growing other crops other than just the perennial blueberries, pay a lot of attention to this. There's some really good publications out there I can help you link to, and we'd be happy to do that. Mentioned this before on the importance of organic matter, but again, if there's one thing you can do for organic fertility, maintain organic matter any opportunity you have. Fertility inputs, some of the ones that are most common and allowed, you can do pH adjustment with agriculture lime, and elemental sulfur, although regarded as synthetic, is actually allowed. But things like quicklime or slake lime aren't, so just be aware of that. Fertilizers, no synthetics. So some of the ones you typically see with blueberries, ammonium sulfate and things like that, aren't going to be an option for you. What is allowed? Compost, manures, fish emulsions, bone meals, blood meal, various other products. Be very wary if you see liquid nitrogen products that have a nitrogen content of greater than 4% that claim to be organic. If they're listed with OMRI or Washington State Department of Agriculture, they'd be acceptable. Otherwise, they are not. Pay attention to labels on fertilizers because you will run across fertilizers that say organic, but they're not acceptable for use in certified organic production. The reason is fertilizers are not considered an agricultural product. So the USDA does not control the labeling of fertilizers. So there was actually a sewage sludge fertilizer product that had organic something or other as the name. I can't remember now, that someone brought to our attention, I guess, last year. So it was perfectly legal for them to put that on the package, but of course a sewage sludge derived fertilizer is not acceptable in certified organic production. So be very wary just because you see the word organic that it's okay. Look instead for some other cues, and we'll talk about those in a minute. In the instance that you did have to lower your pH, which is reasonable with blueberries, you can use elemental sulfur in that way, in that you apply it. The biggest thing is give it time to work. It's not going to be instantaneous, so just recognize that. Elemental sulfur is commonly used in conventional agriculture. It's actually regarded as a synthetic, but it's one of the synthetics that's actually allowed in organic production. So that's a tool that's commonly used in agriculture. It's not something specific only to certified organic. Manure use, it's a great fertility maintenance tool, but it can come with its own issues such as weed seeds and things of that nature. And of course, we want to pay attention to the 90-120 day rule, which are within the regs themselves, but also from a food safety standpoint, just a really good idea to follow. There is no such thing as certified organic manure. Manure is not considered an agricultural product. So manure from conventional operations can be used. If you're sourcing manure in from somewhere else, somewhere off farm, you need to ask questions and actually have written documentation that it is just manure or bedding and things like that. No other chemicals or components have been added to it. Animal manures can be used raw. Or can in an uncomposted state, to say it maybe more accurately. It just, in that event, you have to follow the 90 and 120 day rule. So for instance, with blueberries, after you harvest, you can apply it. It's no problem. If you apply it before harvest, look at the 90 days. So that's the restriction on using non-composted manure products. Pest control, I haven't gone to the specifics on this because I think other speakers will do better than I will. There are many options that are allowed for use. We can find them listed in things like OMRI and other sources, but that's not to say that they're always highly effective. Some of the ones that are very effective are very sensitive on when you apply it. If you wait too late to apply something to the insect, you're going to miss your control window. So it is aware these are not managed the same way as you would with conventional pesticides. Typically, there's virtually no residual activity, so you're only going to be impacting those populations of pests that are there at the time. So it's something to understand. These are used in a different way than you would conventional insecticides or other pesticides. So understand the limitations and how they need to be addressed. And how do you maintain your own beneficial population when there are pressures to it, either from your own production practices or adjoining production practices? One of the key elements to provide habitat for the beneficials. It's called refuge, you'll see it referred to. Those are just areas that are specifically set aside. It can be everything from fence rows to intentionally planted flower gardens. Some of the more sophisticated and in some ways better organic growers will have permanent flower beds out in various production areas specifically to provide nectar. Refuges, nectar sources and things like that are really should be a cornerstone for all producers. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be an area you're specifically planting. A lot of people have refuges on their farm anyway, just in natural wild areas and things of that nature. So don't think you have to go put in an elaborate flower garden. There are people that will just plant a row of various flowers within a field. That works great. So it's not something that has to be dramatic on the part of the producer, but that is an excellent method. One of the things that we as a department are very careful to do, you won't hear me say organic is better or nicer or friendlier or whatever. There's good farmers and bad farmers no matter what production methods, no matter what the crop. And so what it comes down to is organic is about market access, and that's what organic certification is. It allows market access through a particular production method. Doesn't mean it's superior, better, or anything. It's just a different option. And so, you know, we very much understand, and I come from a conventional farming background. So, yeah, we're not of the mindset that conventional is somehow bad. It's just, here's what organic is. So what are some better options than maybe just relying on chemical tools or sprays or things of that nature? That's where, you know, healthy plants start with that. A healthy plant can better resist a pest population. Looking at, you know, even cultural methods. So obviously plant-resistant cultivars whenever possible, but what about spacing? You know, Kentucky has a lot of humidity, and so the longer things stay wet, like leaf wetness and things like that, the greater incidence of disease for any number of different pathogens. So what about increasing spacing or row distances or things of that nature? There are cultural factors like that that can help minimize some of the input needs, and it gives you a better chance at success. Insect control, very similar, but again, predatory insects can play an important role with insect control in organic crops. So things like refuges, nectar crops are important. And again, just learning more about the pests that you are having to deal with. Inputs, when it comes to inputs, how do I evaluate what inputs are allowed for organic production? Luckily, we have a few easy methods. Those are a couple of material review organizations that actually verify that products are acceptable. One of those is OMRI, O-M-R-I Institute. It's Organic Materials Review Institute. They are a recognized entity that will review products, and you'll see their little stamp on products. A second one that we as a department also recognize is Washington State Department of Agriculture. Both of those are available online. We have a link from our organic webpage for those. And a third one we use is Pennsylvania Certified Organic, or PCO. That's not a list that's available online. We actually have to pay to get access to that, but we provide it to our clients. Primarily, those first two cover most options with crop. There'll be some additional ones from PCO, but PCO is very valuable for livestock producers. They have a number of products that are not listed on the others. And also, we as a certifier will review products for acceptability. So why is it so important to review products? And this is important. It's very hard for you to read the regulations and other materials and say this product is okay, and here's why. Mine gypsum is completely acceptable for use. Gypsum coming out of a power plant scrubber is not. Gypsum that's made from recycled wallboard is not. So those are kind of synthetic versus natural. So we can think of the mined product as natural. The difficulty becomes if you have a mined product that has a prohibited dust suppressant added to it during the grinding process, such as mineral oil. Suddenly we now have a prohibited product. So that's why it's so complicated. So not every mined gypsum product is okay. We can say every wallboard recycled gypsum product is a problem, and it's not allowed. But we can't say every mined gypsum product because we have to know how is it produced. So that's why this gets so complicated and why we push so hard to look at those lists that have previously reviewed products. Because we have run into issues where somebody uses a product or a salesman sells a product and says it's okay, and it's not. And we don't have options with that. It becomes an application of prohibited substance, and that has penalties for a producer.